There is a country in Asia where right now in 2025 parents are lining up outside a building in Tokyo just to collect secondhand clothes for their children. And this is not a poor country, this is Japan the same. Japan that was once so rich that the land under one single palace in Tokyo was worth more than all the real estate in the entire state of California. And when you hear that, something doesn't add up, right? Because how does a country fall that far? How does the richest, most powerful economy in all of Asia end up with people struggling to afford groceries and over 10,000 companies shutting down in a single year? Well, that story starts not in a boardroom or a bank. It starts in 1945 in a city that had just been flattened. Literally flattened. 67 major cities in Japan had been bombed. Millions of people had nothing to eat. The streets were quiet in the worst possible way, and Japan as a country was basically finished. And now here's where it gets interesting. Because the United States of America, the same country that dropped those bombs, suddenly decided that Japan needed to be saved. And the reason had nothing to do with kindness. America was terrified that hungry, desperate Japanese people would turn toward communism, toward the Soviet Union, which was already spreading its influence through China and North Korea. And if Japan fell too, the entire Pacific Ocean would have become Soviet territory. So America made a very cold, very calculated decision. They would rebuild Japan and use it as a showcase, a living advertisement that said, look, side with us and you will get rich, side with them and you will starve. So America pumped billions of dollars into Japanese factories, saved companies like Toyota from complete collapse, handed over technology blueprints for steel and electronics, and opened up American consumers to buy Japanese goods with almost no restrictions. And what happened next is one of the most remarkable economic stories in modern history, because in just 20 years, Japan went from rubble and starvation to becoming the third largest economy on the entire planet, beating Germany, beating France, beating the United Kingdom, and by the 1980s, Japanese cars had captured nearly a quarter of the American car market. Japanese companies held more than half of the global semiconductor market, and 6 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world were Japanese. Not American Japanese, and you can imagine how that felt in America. Auto workers were literally smashing Toyota cars with sledgehammers on live television. Politicians were furious, the mood was dark, and in 1985 America sat Japan down and said you need to sign something called the Plaza Accord. And what this agreement did was simple but devastating. It made the Japanese yen much stronger against the US dollar almost overnight. So in 1985, one US dollar was worth 260 Japanese yen, and then just 2 years later that same dollar was worth only 130 yen. Now think about what that means for a car company. If Toyota was selling a car in America for $10,000 and making a good profit in yen, suddenly that same car had to be priced at $20,000 just to bring home the same amount in yen. So Toyota became expensive. Japanese exports started shrinking and the economy felt the pressure. And here is where Japan made the mistake that changed everything to fight this pressure. Japanese banks cut interest rates very low so that businesses could borrow money cheaply and invest in better technology. But instead of doing that, instead of building better factories and smarter products, companies and regular people took that cheap borrowed money and started putting it into the stock market and into land and property. And it worked. At first it worked beautifully. The stock market went from 6,000 points in the early 80s to nearly 39,000 by 1989. Land prices in Tokyo went up 200 to 300%, and people felt like they had discovered a money machine. That would never stop. Companies like Sony and Nissan were making more profit from stock market trading than from actually selling their products. Toyota at one point was making 30% of its profits not from cars but from financial investments. And the whole country got drunk on this feeling. And then in 1989, the Japanese government looked at what was happening and got scared. So they raised interest rates sharply to cool things down, and that one decision burst the bubble completely. The stock market collapsed, land prices collapsed, and suddenly every company that had borrowed huge amounts of money against the value of their stocks and properties found that those assets were now worth almost nothing while the debt was still completely real. Nissan was sitting on $20 billion in debt with nothing to pay it back. Sony had bought an American movie studio for nearly $5 billion when money was cheap and then had to write off almost $3 billion in losses when the crash hit. Toshiba, which had been the world leader in memory chips, got so paralyzed by debt that a South Korean company called Samsung walked in, invested aggressively, and took the crown permanently. And now here's the part that is hardest to understand. When all of this was falling apart, the Japanese government did not let these broken companies die. They kept giving them new loans just to pay interest on the old loans. So the company was not growing, it was not hiring anyone. It was not building anything new, it was just breathing. Barely. And by the early 2000s, nearly 30% of all Japanese companies were exactly like this. Economists started calling them zombie companies, and these zombies did something quietly terrible. They sold their products at almost no profits just to get cash, which meant no other company could charge a proper price, which meant no profits, which meant no wage increases, which meant ordinary Japanese people stopped spending. And when people stop spending, the whole economy slows down, and young people entering the workforce in the 90s found nothing waiting for them. Companies stopped hiring graduates for almost a decade, so that entire generation ended up in part-time work, convenience stores, small jobs with no future. And now those same people are in their 50s. They never built proper careers. They never developed leadership skills. Many of them never married because in Japan, a man without a stable job was considered not ready for marriage. And so birth rates fell and kept falling. And today Japan is shutting down 450 schools a year because there simply are not enough children. And over a fifth of the entire Japanese population is now above 70 years old. And the average income in Japan has not risen in 30 years. Young people today are technically earning less in real terms than their parents did in 1989. And somewhere in all of this is a lesson that does not come with a neat ending. Because Japan is still in it, still trying to figure out what comes next. And that question of what a country does when it has made too many mistakes for too long is one that is still being answered quietly. One empty school and one unpaid loan at a time.